She and Christopher had spent part of the winter occupying a small National Trust property near Greystoke in Cumbria, filling a vacancy until the next long-term leaseholders took over. A snowy January that kept them indoors and by the fire. The last few weeks they had taken up residence in a holiday flat in a small village on the south coast of Cornwall, where they walked short stretches of the coastal path when it wasn't pouring rain. Christopher focused on teaching Pru to identify the seabirds, but her guesses were erratic. Is it a tern? Arctic? Sandwich? Common? Terns were her fallback guess, as there were only a few from which to choose. If it was a gull, she was lost. He knew the countryside too well, and she found it difficult to catch him out on the native plant landscape. As their 6 months together drew to a close, Pru thought of Christopher back to his job in Chelsea, and Pru to... what? If only those letters would stop, perhaps she could think clearly enough to make a decision. She had spent her first year in England, fresh from Texas, in search of a head gardener post while filling her days with maintenance work in London, cutting grass, weeding, planting pots of annuals. No one had wanted to hire her until at last Davina and Brian Templeton took her on to restore a historic Humphrey Repton garden near Royal Tunbridge Wells. A murder notwithstanding, it had gone well enough to draw the attention of the gardening world. And now the gardens that had once rejected her were begging her to work for them. What about this one? Christopher picked up the latest offer from an ever-growing stack on the coffee table. She kissed him and took the letter from Sir Frank Chesterton, Victorian Gardens and Grottos. I don't want to live in Shropshire, she explained, and not for the first time. Christopher seemed determined that she consider each offer, no matter how far apart it put them. He kept telling her that he wanted to be fair, not assume too much. You don't want to give up gardening, do you? No, she said, but my priorities have shifted. She raised her eyebrows and held his gaze until he smiled in acknowledgement and squeezed her hand. She would have to work, she knew that. And he would have to work. They couldn't be vagabonds the rest of their lives. They'd settled into this life together with little talk of the future, because Christopher said he didn't want to hold her back. But now the future breathed down their necks. You're not trying to get rid of me, are you? She asked. She was just joking, but his response was to take her in his arms and bury his face in her hair. I want you with me always, he whispered. They had been about to head out the door to the pub, but that could wait. Could you please make a job come open at Chiswick House? She asked, lying on her side in bed, head propped up in her hand. That would be quite near his flat. As if they'd listen to me. And the conversation wandered off into discussing one more visit to family and friends in the south on their way back to London. As much as Christopher had thrown himself into this gap, in reality, she knew he looked forward to getting back to police work. She could see it on his face, and in the absent-minded way he replied to simple questions. Whether he wanted tea or coffee, digestive or ginger nut biscuit. She caught him in pensive moods, staring out the window that faced the sea, or stirring his coffee until it was too cold to drink. Yes, he wanted to get back to work, and if Pru could find something to do, even for a while, she thought that he would feel better about wanting it. This one, she said one afternoon. For the past several months, Pru's letters had been forwarded to Joe in London, who sent a packet off to Pru every few days, letters full of offers to discuss the head gardener position at what now seemed like far-flung corners of the country. Pru left the ever-growing stack on the coffee table and read and reread them, but none had any appeal to her. Except for a letter that had arrived 2 days ago, in the latest batch, as she shuffled through pleas from Boers.